Good evening to everybody, and welcome to another interview with a mission-driven entrepreneur. Another episode of What's the Point? And through purpose, that's one of the key things in business enjoyment. That's where the joy comes from in terms of understanding who we are and the difference we make in the world, the people that we help. And through that comes the real excitement from our business. If you are interested, if you're not clear about what your purpose is, do be aware that at the end of this month I do have a challenge coming up, a Your Purpose challenge. It's completely free. The link's in there. The website address is pretty clear. But have a look at that, register, more information on there, tell you more about it. But it's to help you to go through that process of understanding who you are and getting connected to your true purpose. So take a moment to check that out, and at any time, just sort of have a look on that link and see where we go. Anyway, let's get on with the conversation today, which it is with Lisa Schermerhorn, who is a mindset coach, interested in your why, which is another big thing, underlying that purpose, author, all these sort of things. And let's get on. Let's find out. And let's most importantly, let's find out, what is the point of Lisa Schermerhorn? Lisa, welcome.
Oh, what is the point? That's a big question. I've been trying to figure that out my whole life.
Exactly. But aren't we all, isn't that sort of part of the journey of life to a certain extent?
Exactly. And it was so funny because a friend of mine recently said, you're so lucky because you know your purpose. And then 6 months later, I said to him, I wish I hadn't told you that because now I have no idea because everything's changed on me again.
But it's an evolving thing, and it's all about sort of keeping direction and all the rest of it. So let's kick off with that. Let's see. Let's bring you forward. And okay, so things evolve. But how would you define what your mission is? What is your purpose in life as best as you see it right now?
Well, I'll give people a little insight about who I am so you have a general idea. About 20 years ago, well, actually going back to my childhood, I had learning disabilities. I had minor learning disabilities that were undiagnosed. So when I went to school, I started out, everyone could write, everyone knew their numbers, they knew their colors, they knew their numbers and all that. I was lost. And I transposed numbers and letters, and I spent every summer of my childhood in summer school. And I went on to believe that I was stupid. I went on to believe that everyone else knew more than I did, and I always gave my power away to others. And in doing that, I went on to marry at a young age, and I was always so impressed, especially my ex-husband really seemed to know who he was and what he wanted. And I would always admired him for that. And I would meet people who were so passionate about things. And I was like, well, I'm a mom, and that's what I'm going to be. And then my kids started growing up, and I was lost and suddenly went into this deep depression. And I spiraled, and I was going to therapists 2 to 3 times a week, and no one was helping me.
Wow.
And someone had suggested a hypnotherapist, and I was like, wait a minute, they make you quack like a duck, don't they? Like, what is it that these people are going to have to offer me? But I was so desperate, I wanted to try it. So I did. And what I found was many people perceive hypnosis in a way, which is what I did, and I was very skeptical, were these stage hypnotists where you go on and they would make people do things and silly things. What I discovered was that was not at all when hypnosis is used as a therapeutic way of helping people. It's very different. We actually move in and out of hypnosis 7 to 10 times a day. If you've ever daydreamed, if you've ever meditated, that's all that state is. So once that was explained to me, I was more open. And she took me back to the root cause of feeling stupid and all of the events that happened in my life that caused me to have these belief systems that were holding me back.
Yeah.
And we released them. And I thought, this is a miracle. And I noticed all the things that changed in my life once that started to happen. And I used the metaphor, imagine that you have a highway and you want to get to your destination. And I put these giant boulders on the highway, blocking my way to get there. That's what these belief systems do. And we're so busy pointing our fingers at everyone else. And I had three fingers pointing back at me because these belief systems were lies. And that's where the title to my book came in every belief is a lie. Because we get programmed to believe these things. And it was a belief that I created. No one else gave that to me but me.
Mm,
Once I cleared that, all of a sudden my world opened up, and I went on to study neuro-linguistic programming, something called NLP, and a number of other techniques. So I became an expert in the subconscious mind and how it works. And that was so incredibly powerful. Dr. Bruce Lipton talks about this, that he believes that from the time we are born until about the age of 7, that we are fully programmed with
yeah.
everything at that point.
Give me a child at the age of 7 and I'll bring you the man, or whatever the,
Yes.
the phrase.
So when you get to, my understanding is from birth until about 21 years old, our brain frequencies are different.
Mm,
Right? So we have infants, their brain frequency is at something that's called delta, and that's a very deep, wide frequency. Imagine what a newborn baby has to learn. It's extraordinary. Light, colors, sounds, emotions, fine motor skills, gross motor skills, taste. It's amazing. And so they're absorbing these large amounts of information, and then they get into elementary school, and the brain moves into something called theta, which is still a large wave. But if you think about, if you have a lens that you see the world through, I was raised a certain way. So I've now have my socioeconomic status, where I was born. I was born in a suburb of New York City. I have beliefs that my parents, both sides, my parents had. Anything that happened at school, all of these things are a lens that I see the world through. And so now my lens coming from the US is going to be different than your lens coming from the UK and all the things that came in. And I emphasize this for people because people get upset when other people don't see the world the same way that they do. And that's because their lens is different. And it's important to honor that, because how boring would this world be if we all saw everything the exact same way?
yeah, and that's it, because the brain's job is to filter out information because it cannot absorb and process absolutely every the billions of data that comes through. So it's got to learn rules on how to, okay, what is important, what is the stuff I do need to bring through, and as you say, we go through life, and essentially the brain trains itself to filter through the things that it's been taught to filter, and that's why we all get a different reaction and response.
Exactly. Thank you for bringing that up. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. The part of our brain and our system is the reticular activating system. And it is, we get bombarded with millions and millions of bits of information a minute. And our brain cannot process that information. So it acts as a filter, as you said. It's how it works is, every time you buy a car and you drive it off the lot and you get on the road and all of a sudden you see that car everywhere, is because now your mind, that part of your brain, is filtering, looking for that, whereas before it wasn't aware. That's how our brain works.
Mm.
So it's going to bring in these filters, this information, based on your belief system. So if you believe that money is scarce, this is a big one. And I know that you work on this too, is the money mindset. And the powerful part, if you were raised in a situation where money was scarce, or parents that believed that people with money were evil or bad or miserable, whatever that belief is around money, are you going to attract it? So you're going to create a filter that's going to bring in situations that are going to sabotage you. And it happens over and over again. I do a workshop where I show this photo of a mansion, and I ask everyone who here wants to make $1 million a year, and everyone raises their hand. And then I ask them to tell me about the people who live in this house. They hate each other. They're getting a divorce. Their kids are all on drugs. Can't afford to heat the house. So if that's your belief about money and success, why would you ever attract it?
Yeah.
And you start to sabotage, and it's that hamster wheel of getting on that wheel and doing the same thing over and over again, because your conscious mind doesn't have the awareness of the beliefs that your unconscious or subconscious mind has.
Mhm.
When you access it, heal it, release those belief systems, then you get to become authentically you. Then you get to own your behaviors. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah, because there's I don't know which bit it sits in, but there's an underlying desire for us to be right. So when we have a certain criteria, it's like we need to prove that what we believe is correct. And even though it damages us in some way, shape, or form, which is a sabotage, we need to reinforce that, because hooray, we were right. Look, told you it was all going to go horribly wrong. I was right again. And that
Well,
overrule all the things. So the solution is actually to be wrong more of the time.
right. Our unconscious mind, that wounded little 6-year-old that got hurt, that belief system overrides everything.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So think about this. Your 6-year-old or your 2-year-old or your 10-year-old is making major life decisions for you. And it's the part, yeah.
A great example is just look at politics today. And if you look at politicians and think, well, they're just behaving like children, there's exactly that, isn't it?
It's totally that way. And you just made something a comment, and I just wrote that down because I didn't want to forget it, that we always need to prove that we're right. Think about this. And I don't know, for your audience, in the US we have CNN is international,
Yeah.
but you've got CNN, MSNBC, and then you have Fox News, which is a conservative station. Every single person who is watching these shows believes they're getting the truth. How is that possible? Because if you're conservative and you're watching Fox News, and you're a liberal and you're watching MSNBC or CNN, and you're getting completely different stories about the same incident that happened, how is that true? So based on your filter, you choose what resonates the most, and you're going to grab onto it. Now, not everything that's true makes sense, and not everything that makes sense is true. Sometimes the truth is somewhere else, but we grab on for safety because we need that. And what I invite people to think about is, when you're getting news, you're getting the news that your filter wants you to hear. It may not be the truth, and you're getting partial truth, and the truth is missing. My dear friend Richard Messing told me that, and it blew my mind, and it inspired my book, because I'd always worked with the subconscious mind, but when he put it in those terms, it just shifted and changed everything for me of how we actually live our lives based on these beliefs that aren't even true. And here's another thing that's fascinating. We inherit beliefs. We can go back generations. They actually did a study on mice, and they took these lab mice and they had them smell a particular smell. And every time they did, they got shocked. And then they began to associate the smell with the shock, to a point where they would just have that smell and the mice would run. Their grandpups would be introduced to that smell and they would run without even being shocked. And that's evolution.
Mm.
So that's how we work as a society, as human beings. So we inherit trauma that goes back through ancestors. And I will share with you, I work with indigenous cultures because they have been traumatized over and over and over again. And I recently was working with someone who had Aztec and Mayan ancestry in their DNA. And I went back 10 generations for him. And we would go to the 10th generation through their DNA, heal and forgive. Forgiveness is magic. It's very important. And it's one of the most important things that I tell people is it's not about saying that what the other person did is okay. It's about you taking that burden off of you so that you can move forward. And so many people are really afraid to forgive because then they're saying that that what the other person did is okay, or now I have to go back to that relationship and be abused or be, whatever. And it's not about that.
But I would just say, if because I see that quite a bit, where, as you say, I can't forgive because then that lets them off the hook or whatever it might be. But
Right.
Rationally and logically, it makes sense. You need to forgive in order to take that weight off. But how does somebody actually do that and allow that to release themselves?
Yeah.
They might get it
Easier said. Yeah.
Yeah.
Easier said than done. And I give this tool to every single one of my clients. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there's an ancient Hawaiian prayer called the Ho'oponopono.
I can
And
never
I was in, I'm sorry?
never pronounce it.
I know. It isn't easy to pronounce. And I was part of a group, I want to say a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and I was introduced to this prayer, and it's so simple. It's 4 lines, and what I realized was I'm saying this prayer, and I'm thinking about the other person. I'm also thinking about myself because there's two people involved in every argument, in every dysfunctional relationship, and you have to take responsibility for it. And so I made a list of all the people in my life, all the circumstances in my life that created problems for me in my life. And I said this prayer over and over again, and I put them each on an index card, and I had a stack this big. And slowly over time, as I said this prayer, it's I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. And you can find it on YouTube. There's tons of information about it. There's many books that have been written on it. My book has in the chapter, one of the chapters, I have information about the Ho'oponopono prayer. I started doing it, and there was someone who I hadn't spoken to in 14 years, contacted me out of the blue. Hi, I noticed that things in our relationship have changed. I want you back in my life. And we had a huge healing, and they initiated it, and I had not spoken to them. This prayer brings in miracles. And there's a whole story about Dr. Hugh Lin in Hawaii and how this came to be. I don't know if we have the time for that, but it's a beautiful story of how this psychologist cleared out a section of a prison that was for the criminally insane, and just by doing this prayer, that he cleared this whole section out. And it's something that I use for all my clients. It's what I use for ancestors to help them clear those beliefs out and help heal at a very deep level.
Wow, it's quite impressive. So, I mean, you mentioned this. There's a chapter on that in your book, and you mentioned that before. So let's talk about the book you've written. So let's just see if this works. There we go.
Oh, you're good. So that's actually me on the cover. One of my closest friends actually took that photo of me and used a lot of Photoshop. And if you look in every belief, in the word belief, lie is in it. And it absolutely blew me away. when that title came to me. So thank you for showing that. But it's my own process,
Let me just
and
see.
lots of stories in that book about how I was able to overcome and really step into who I am. When we have a belief, let's say even religion, if you're raised in a religious family and you get to a point where I'm like, I don't know if that's really for me. But when you go to leave the tribe, because that's what it is when you have these, mutual beliefs, when you go to leave that, it creates problems in relationships. It happens in all aspects of our life. So when we go to become authentically us, sometimes we lose people in our lives, and there has to be a healing that comes up with that. Sometimes we have to leave jobs. Sometimes we leave, different types of relationships. I was married for 29 years, and I knew that we had gone our separate ways, and I could not be me in that relationship, nor could my ex-husband. And so once I did that, my depression lifted. I started to become joyful. And I found things in my life that I had never found before. And things started coming to me in ways that I had never expected. So instead of blocking and having coping mechanisms dealing with my depression and not knowing who I am, I was able to free myself from those belief systems and come into who I am and become empowered. And most of us live our lives and will go to school or take on a job because our parents are living vicariously through us. Oh, I became an accountant so that I could support my family, but in the meantime, they're going to their job and they're miserable, or a salesperson or something. And you do a lot of that work yourself, is that helping people
Yeah.
really discover that authentic self. And it's not an easy journey, is it?
No, because as you say, the whole thing you've talked through, it's rewriting the program, and because that program's in place, we don't know any different. We've not experienced an alternative. We just think that's the way things are. So we never challenge it, and therefore we run the same patterns and we get the same results. And it just doesn't enter the thought pattern that it can be different. But as you say, every single belief can be challenged. It can be looked at in a different way, and from there you've then opened up the possibility of different choices, different actions, different results.
Exactly. And here's the beautiful thing that happens is, I know for me, I was terrified to be alone, and I didn't believe that I was capable of being on my own. And the first chapter of my book, I talk about going through a week of walking on red hot coals and bending rebar from my throat and bending arrows, breaking arrows from my throat. And in order to graduate that week long program, I had to walk on 40 feet of red hot coals.
Yeah, and
And
just to be clear, that was a program that you were doing. It wasn't just you at home thinking, "Oh, I'm depressed. I'm going to stick
yes,
arrows."
yes, yes. Someone asked me to do that. Yes, thank you for clarifying. So someone asked me to if I wanted to do it, and I said, "Well, I have two things in my life that I'm afraid of: walking on fire and being alone." So I tried the walking on fire first. And what that did was gave me the courage to know that if I could do that, I could do anything. No, I don't tell my clients to go walk on fire. It was just my own process of what I needed to go through.
Yeah,
And when I did that and I stepped out on my own, I always find my greatest fears are my greatest gifts, right? So the things that I'm most afraid of are the things that I need to challenge myself. And when I do, so much richness comes from it. It's that lesson that helped me propel myself to where I am now. If I had stayed small and if I had stayed in that relationship, um, my life would have been very, very different than it is today. I never would have challenged myself to do this work. I never would have written this book. I would be very different. And there's nothing wrong with people choosing that. It was just for me, it was not a question anymore. I had to, and I needed to figure out how I was going to break those belief systems. And so I learned all of these unconventional means, all of these things that work fast, that are not traditional ways to help people move into their own authentic self and figure out who they are and find joy at a deeper level. And when you can help someone at work find joy, they're going to bring that home and they're going to be happier at home. And if they're having trouble at home and you can help them with their issues at home, they're also bringing that to work and becoming more productive at work. So there's all these amazing tools that I help people discover who they are, discover their why they're here. And their why is not their work, it's the why they do everything. My why is challenge. I challenge conventional thinking. That's why I had to walk on 40 feet of red hot coals to do what I do. But that's not for everyone. But I discovered that I realized I wasn't broken because I think differently. I learn differently. And that was a huge part of who I am. So when I discovered my why, it helped me feel whole. It validated me in some way. And you're familiar with the why as well.
Yes, because you're trained by the Y Institute,
Yes.
the Simon Sinek based sort of thing. Well, the story behind that, but you did a Y challenge a few months ago, like I'm doing the Purpose Challenge, and they came on that. So it's I had some inklings of a few things of what it was, but it just helped set it out quite succinctly, and it makes it a lot clearer in terms of because there's different levels to it, isn't it? It's not just the
Exactly. There's 9 different whys.
yeah,
And there's a why and a how and a what. For instance, my why is challenge. How I do that is I help people find a better way. And what I bring is the ability to make sense out of complicated um, and very high level, information. So I'm like the detective. I love to break apart really complex situations and help people make sense of it. And it's one of the things that I love to do. It's one of my gifts. Whereas there are other people who have contribute, which are those who love to be behind the scenes, not necessarily the center, but they like to build teams. They like to help other people, and contribute is a big one for me too. It wasn't my top 3, but it's probably my 4th. But there's people who like to clarify. There are people who simplify, and these are the simplifiers are needed on teams, because if you have a bunch of people who are better way, these are people who are visionaries, who are always thinking of making things better, but they get stuck because there's always a better way. It's like when you buy a computer and as soon as you walk off out of the store, it's obsolete because there's a new one coming. That's how better way people think. So they can never get their ideas off the ground. So they need to have other people who can help them, right way people who create structure. So when you know that about your people and you know that about your family members, it helps you with your language. It helps you better understand them, because challenge people and right way people are, there's a certain way to do everything, and you have to do it a certain way. Challenge people are all over the place, and they can really trigger each other. But when you know that about each other, you honor that and say, I need a person like that to organize me. And
yeah.
they need people like me to come up with solutions and create new ideas so they can create structure for it. So it's a beautiful collaboration that can happen once you can get the triggers out of the way and better understand each
I
other
think
and what motivates them.
there's an interesting flip side from something you said earlier on as well. So, within our greatest fear lies our greatest progress, our greatest success, our greatest achievements.
Right.
But also, our greatest strength is the one thing that holds us back from moving forwards. So, even when we discover that, as you said, you've got to have other people around you with different types, different things, always challenging the norm and looking at things in different ways, because there's always alternative ways of doing everything. And as you say, within every
Yeah.
belief is
Yeah.
so it's
Well,
always,
here's the thing. My belief about myself growing up is my greatest wound of being disempowered. So by healing that, now I know that at a deep level more than anyone else, because I had to go to the depths of despair. And so in healing that, I know the other side of empowerment now. I and so I can now bring those gifts, bring those skills. But I was so afraid of it all my life that I was afraid to touch it. And what I realized was it was the fear of the fear. Because once I got rid of the fear, I was like, this is a piece of cake. I was like, I've waited my whole life and I was afraid of this. And now I've never had more joy in my entire life. But the process is releasing the emotions around it, the triggers. And when you can get to a state of neutrality around your fear, and then you see it from a different perspective, it opens up a whole new world for you. And that's all I'm doing, because I'm not here to make anyone do or say or be anything other than who they are. And my idea of what someone should be could be very different than who they believe. And that's not my role as a coach. My job is knowing that my client has everything they need inside of them. I'm just here to help them see it,
Yeah.
because I'm not here as a therapist. I'm not here to do anything but help them find joy in their life and be authentic.
Beautiful. That sounds like it brings us back to the purposes. So
True.
before we wrap up, is there any particular things that you would recommend people go and do to make sure that they get clear about their true authentic selves and get closer to their purpose and passion?
Well, first I would say read my book, because it has lots of tools. Look, it's on Kindle. It's 99 cents, or I don't know what that is in pounds.
Yeah,
It's
it was like
probably,
81 in the
yeah.
UK. Less than a
And
pound.
it's less than a pound. And it will give you tools that will real and I got very raw and vulnerable in there. I tell my stories in there. I give exercises to help people really think. I talk about money mindset in there. I talk about, how to get rid of some of these belief systems. It's important to me to have these tools. I also have videos for those who have bought the book. I'm still dealing with technical difficulties trying to get these people to get that, but there will be, if they're not there already, videos that will help. And also my partner, Kevin Martin, has some videos there as well. And we both are open and willing to just have a talk. I love to do discussion sessions and give people as much value as I can to help people out. There's no obligation of any kind. I'm here because I know what I went through, and I became the person that I was looking for 20 years ago, so that other people don't have to go through what I did. I believe that you don't have to deal with 20 years of struggle when you can go out and use these tools and help people shift their lives quickly so they can figure out who they are and bring joy to their life and find out what their why and what their purpose is. And this is in their work, in their home life, in their relationships as a parent. It really impacts all aspects of their life. And I just invite people to understand that you have the choice. You have a choice. And we actually can change our lives. Every 4 seconds, you can make a different decision in your life. Every 4 seconds, you can make a choice to better your life and to better yourself and change yourself in ways that you could never imagine.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Lisa. And I've read your book, and thank you for well, no, I didn't buy it, didn't say, but it's a very I will say you gave it to me, no, but I read it, I bought it. Yeah. 81p. But it's very well set out. It's very easy to read. There's some very clear action points. So it's not a heavy read by any means, and as you say, it covers a wide range of different things. So it's a very useful go-to guide. The one thing I would just say to anybody is you do actually, as is alluded to before, it does require doing some work, not necessarily hard manual work, but some thinking and facing some demons that you might be scared of facing. But as you said, it's only the fear that's holding you back. It's not the thing itself.
Exactly.
Kennedy, wasn't it? Fear in the fear itself or something, whatever it was. But, you know.
Yes, the only thing we have to fear is self. Is that Roosevelt, former
Roosevelt.
president in the U.S., said that. But
Somebody.
someone famous said that. But it is true. And the opposite of fear is love. So when we go into our hearts and we live our purpose and our passion, we're coming from that place. And it changes our life and it changes the people around us. Because when we shift the people around us as well. I know that every time that I have a breakthrough in my life, my children change. And they don't even live with me, they live 4 hours away. But they're always observing you. So if you even start out doing this for your children or for your loved ones and not even for yourself, because sometimes people don't feel worthy of doing the work, right? So they feel that they need to do it for someone else. You can start out that way and fake it till you make it.
And something that came up when you were speaking earlier on and about that as well is the contagion element of emotions that he's sort of alluding to. And there was a study done that if for example you come home from work and you're not in a great mood or whatever it was, if you say, right, I'm going to be the best person I can when I get home, I'm going to lift myself up and be positive. 4 minutes is the critical time zone. So if you can be your best self for 4 minutes, that is enough for the people around you to pick up on that, and then they're going to be positive, and then that reflects back to you, and the reflection keeps going, and you get the exponential curve. So rather than thinking, oh my god, I've got to be nice and happy all the time, just 4 minutes. Do the 4 minutes. Don't see.
It's very powerful. It's very powerful because someone who's very down and depressed can have the exact same impact on people too.
Absolutely.
Have you been in people's energy and they're like, "Hi, how are you?" And I always say it's like, what is the donkey from Winnie the Pooh, Eeyore? It's like, oh no, another Eeyore has come into my life.
Oh dear. Thank you so much for coming on, Lisa. Appreciate you taking the time. Some great points you've brought out there, and as I say, as you say, you know, it's nothing to get the book. It's worth having a look at. Let me see if I can bring it up again. Can I? I can. Yay!
Yay. Well, thank you so much.
Better stay out because I'm not sure they can hear me when I'm down there. But very simple and easy to read, and a lot of value in it. But yeah, take a look at what Lisa's doing, and Kevin as well. So thank you so much for coming on, Lisa.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolute pleasure. I will move you to one side, and I'll just say farewell to everyone. So thank you for everybody for joining in. I hope you got some value out of that. Worth having a look at the book as mentioned, and of course, if you want to dig further into finding out about yourself, either looking at Lisa's take on the why, or as mentioned at the start, my purpose challenge. So just type in yourpurposechallenge.com and have a look at that. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll leave you be. My name is Andrew Miller from Business Enjoyment, and I want you to enjoy your business so much it makes your bits tingle.